The giant council room was filled with thousands of strange voices making noise from all over the galaxy. The walls were so tall they seemed to touch the stars, and everywhere you looked there were creatures that looked nothing like humans. Some had crystal skin that sparkled in the light. Others were made of gas that floated in clear containers. Many had tentacles instead of arms, and some had no body at all, just pure energy floating in the air. High Admiral Quan Ho stood very still in a metal box in the center of the room. His gray hair was cut short, and his dark eyes showed no fear, even though he was surrounded by enemies. His blue uniform had many medals on it from wars he had fought for Earth. But today, those victories meant nothing. The aliens around him were deciding if humans should be free or slaves. The vote had been going on for 3 days now, and every hour more alien species arrived to cast their vote against humanity. The Trilaxians were tall beings made of living crystal who could cut through steel with their bare hands. They raised their sharp crystal arms and voted yes to enslave Earth. The crowd cheered when they saw this, because the Trilaxians were known as fierce warriors who never showed mercy to their enemies. Next came the Vaporays, who lived in gas clouds floating through space. They had no solid bodies but could control the air itself and suffocate entire planets by changing the atmosphere. Their ghostly forms flickered as they voted yes to make humans slaves. The other aliens nodded in approval, because if even the peaceful gas beings wanted humans locked away, then humans must be truly dangerous. The Herbani were next, and this surprised everyone in the room. These plant-like creatures had never hurt anyone in their 1,000-year history. They grew food for hungry planets and healed sick aliens with their natural medicines. But even they raised their green tentacles to vote yes for human slavery. The room went completely silent when this happened, because if the kindest species in the galaxy wanted humans enslaved, then humans must be monsters, one by one. Every species cast their vote, and the pattern was always the same. Yes to slavery, yes to containment, yes to controlling the human threat. The deeplings who lived in ocean worlds voted yes. The skyborn who never landed on planets voted yes. The hive minds who shared one brain across millions of bodies voted yes. Even the ancients who had lived for 10,000 years and seen everything voted yes to enslave humanity. Admiral Quan Ho listened to each vote without moving a muscle on his face. His hands were locked behind his back in metal chains, but he stood as straight as a soldier. The translator in his ear told him what each alien was saying, and most of them said the same thing. Humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be free in the galaxy. The charges against humanity were read out loud in hundreds of different alien languages. The first charge was that humans started wars over everything. They fought over land, water, food, and even things that could not be touched, like honor and pride. The second charge was that humans could not follow rules. In 50 years of being part of the galactic community, humans had broken 17 peace treaties and caused 3 major diplomatic disasters. The third charge was the most serious. Humans were spreading their violent nature to other species. Young aliens who met humans started acting more. Aggressive, peaceful planets that traded with Earth began building weapons. Old alliances were breaking apart because humans taught other species that violence could solve problems. The galaxy was becoming more dangerous because of human influence. A prosecutor was a tall blue alien called Veltar, who had studied human behavior for 20 years. He stood up and pointed at Admiral Quan Ho with 4 arms, while his other 2 arms held up pictures of human wars. The images showed Earth covered in smoke and fire, with humans fighting each other with terrible weapons. He showed videos of human soldiers celebrating after winning battles and humans cheering when their enemies died. Veltar spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber like thunder. He said humans were born killers who enjoyed causing pain. He said they were like a disease that would spread violence throughout the peaceful galaxy. He said the only way to protect civilized species was to lock humans away forever on one planet where they could only hurt each other. The defense lawyer for humanity was a small gray alien called Nixren, who had worked with humans for 10 years. He tried to argue that humans could be peaceful, but his voice was too quiet, and nobody listened when he spoke. He showed pictures of human art and music and stories about humans helping other species. But every time he tried to speak, the other aliens would shout him down. When Nixren mentioned that humans had saved the Corvani from a plague, the Corvani representative stood up and said, humans only helped because they wanted something in return. When he talked about human scientists sharing their knowledge freely, the other aliens said humans were just trying to make other species dependent on them. The final vote took place on the third day, and it was not even close. 847 species voted to enslave humanity. Only 12 voted against it, and most of those were tiny species with no real power in the galaxy. The room exploded in cheers and celebration as the results were announced. Aliens danced and sang in their strange ways, because they thought they had saved the galaxy from destruction. The sentence was read by the Grand Council leader, a massive creature that looked like a floating brain with 1,000 eyes around it. Humanity would be moved to a single planet and watched constantly. All human colonies would be destroyed. All human ships would be taken away. Human technology would be controlled and limited. Human population would be managed to prevent them from growing too strong. But as the aliens celebrated their victory, something strange happened. Admiral Quan Ho started to smile. It was not a big smile, just a tiny curve at the corner of his mouth that nobody noticed. The aliens were too busy cheering to pay attention to the human prisoner. They did not see the look in his eyes that showed he was not defeated at all. When the guards came to take Admiral Quan Ho away, he turned to face the thousands of aliens in the chamber. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke his final words. "You have no idea what you have just done." The aliens laughed at this, thinking it was just the angry words of a beaten enemy. They thought they had won the greatest victory in galactic history. They had no way of knowing that Admiral Quan Ho had wanted this vote to happen. They did not know that humans had been planning for this day for decades. They could not imagine that the most aggressive species in space had been pretending to be weaker than they really were. The aliens thought they were the hunters, but they had just become the prey, as Admiral Quan Ho was led away in chains. His smile grew a little bigger. The trap was set and the galaxy had walked right into it. Colonel Min Ho floated in his invisible ship, watching the biggest fleet in galactic history gather before him. 10,000 warships from every corner of the galaxy had come together to destroy humanity once and for all. The ships were all different, shapes and sizes, because each alien species had their own way of building war machines. Some ships looked like giant crystals that sparkled in the starlight. Others were made of pure energy that glowed like small suns. The Trilaxian ships were long and sharp like giant needles made of crystal that could cut through anything. The few Trilaxians who had survived the sound attacks were now filled with rage and wanted revenge against the humans who had destroyed their beautiful cities. Their crystal ships could slice through metal like it was paper, and their weapons could turn solid matter into dust. The Vapores had built ships that looked like metal clouds filled with poisonous gas that could kill any living thing that breathed it. The gas beings who had not died from the chemical attacks were now desperate to strike back at humanity. Their ships could become invisible by mixing with space dust, and their weapons could suck all the air out of enemy ships. The Deeplings brought massive ships that looked like metal whales swimming through space. These ocean dwellers had survived the acid attacks by hiding in the deepest parts of their worlds, and now they wanted to make humans pay for poisoning their waters. Their ships could create gravity wells that crushed other vessels like tin cans. Even the peaceful Herbany had joined the fleet with ships that looked like giant flowers made of metal. The plant beings who had always avoided violence were now so angry about the emotional attacks that they were ready to fight. The few Herbani who had not withered away wanted to see humanity destroyed completely. The alien fleet was led by Grand Admiral Zekran, a massive creature with 12 arms and 3 heads, who had fought in 1,000 battles across the galaxy. He had never lost a single war, and he was not planning to start now. His flagship was the size of a small moon and carried enough weapons to destroy an entire solar system. Zekran looked at his screens and smiled with all 3 of his mouths. The human fleet that had come to meet them was tiny compared to his massive armada. Only 300 human ships faced his 10,000 vessels. The humans were outnumbered more than 30 to 1. and their ships looked small and weak compared to the alien war machines. But Commander Sujin was not worried as she stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the alien fleet approach. She had been planning this battle for 20 years, and she knew exactly how it would end. The human ships looked simple and basic, but they had been built using technology stolen from every species in the galaxy. Each human vessel contained weapons and defenses that no alien had ever seen before. The battle began when the alien fleet fired their weapons all at the same time. Thousands of energy beams and missiles filled the space between the two fleets. The light was so bright that it could be seen from planets light years away. The aliens expected to see the human ships destroyed in the first few seconds, but something impossible happened instead. The human ships did not try to dodge or run away. Instead, they flew straight into the alien weapons. The alien beams and missiles hit the human vessels, but nothing happened. The human ships kept flying forward without any damage at all. The aliens could not believe what they were seeing, because their most powerful weapons were having no effect. Engineer Han Sol had spent 15 years working on alien shipyards, learning how every species built their weapons. He had discovered that each alien race had developed defenses against their own weapons, but not against weapons from other species. The human ships were covered in armor that combined defensive technology from every alien civilization. When the Trilaxian crystal beams hit the human ships, they were absorbed by Vapore's energy shields. When the Deepling gravity weapons tried to crush the human vessels, they were deflected by Herbani, plant-based materials that could bend without breaking. The aliens had made their weapons to fight each other, but humans had learned to defend against all of them. The real surprise came when the human ships reached the alien fleet. Commander Sujin gave the order to attack, and the human weapons began to fire. The human ships were small, but their weapons were more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each human vessel carried weapons that had been designed by studying every alien military technology. The human ships fired crystal-cutting beams at the Trilaxian vessels. The crystal ships that could slice through any metal were cut apart like glass by weapons that used their own technology against them. The Vapor's ships tried to become invisible, but the humans could see them using sensors that detected gas particles. The Deepling ships tried to crush the human vessels, but the humans used gravity weapons that were stronger than anything the ocean dwellers had ever built. But the real destruction came from something the aliens had never expected. The human ships began broadcasting signals that confused the alien computer systems. Engineer Han Sol had planted viruses in the alien communication networks months before the battle started. The viruses had been sleeping and waiting for the right moment to activate. When the viruses woke up, they began sending false orders to every alien ship in the fleet. The Trilaxian ships received messages telling them that the Vapores were traitors who needed to be destroyed. The Vapores got orders saying that the Deeplings were secretly working with the humans. The Deeplings were told that the Herbani were planning to poison everyone with their plant toxins within minutes. The alien fleet was attacking itself. The species that had come together to destroy humanity were now fighting each other with the same fury they had planned to use against the humans. The Trilaxians began cutting apart Vapor's ships. The Deeplings started crushing Herbani vessels. The confusion spread through the entire fleet as every species turned on their former allies. Grand Admiral Zekran tried to restore order, but his own communication systems had been infected by the human virus. His orders were being changed as he sent them, so instead of telling his ships to stop fighting each other, he was actually commanding them to attack more viciously. The greatest military mind in galactic history was being defeated by a computer program that turned his own words against him. Commander Sujin watched as the massive alien fleet tore itself apart. The ships that had survived the human weapons were being destroyed by their own allies. Species that had been friends for thousands of years were now trying to kill each other because they believed lies created by human technology. The battle that was supposed to last for days was over in 6 hours. The greatest fleet in galactic history had been destroyed not by superior numbers or better weapons, but by confusion and mistrust. The few alien ships that survived the carnage limped back to their homeworlds, carrying news that would terrify every species in the galaxy. The aliens had learned that humans were not just aggressive fighters but strategic geniuses who could turn any advantage into a weakness. They had used the galaxy's own diversity against itself, proving that cooperation could become a fatal flaw when the wrong enemy knew how to exploit it. As the wreckage of 10,000 alien ships drifted through space, Commander Su Jin sent a message to Admiral Quan Ho in his prison cell. The message was simple, but it changed everything. The galaxy is ours. Ambassador So Young walked slowly into the same giant council chamber where humanity had been condemned exactly 1 year ago. But everything was different now. The room that had once been filled with thousands of confident alien voices was now almost empty. Only a few hundred delegates remained, and they all looked terrified. Their various alien bodies were shaking with fear as they waited for the human ambassador to speak. The crystal walls of the chamber were cracked and broken in many places because several Trilaxian delegates had collapsed from stress, and their crystal bodies had shattered on the floor. The air recycling systems were working overtime to filter out the toxic gases that some of the Vaporase delegates were leaking from their damaged containment suits. Even the lighting was dim because many of the energy beings who usually powered the chamber had fled back to their home worlds. So Young took her place at the central podium where the Grand Council leader used to sit. The massive brain creature with 1,000 eyes had been one of the first to die when human agents released a virus that attacked its neural pathways. Now a simple human woman stood in the place of the most powerful being in the galaxy. Her black hair was tied back in a simple style, and she wore a plain blue uniform with no decorations. The Trilaxian delegate who had once voted so proudly to enslave humanity now crawled forward on his hands and knees. His crystal body was dull and cracked because the sonic attacks had damaged his internal structure. He spoke in a voice that sounded like breaking glass as he begged for the attacks on his people to stop. The beautiful crystal cities that had stood for 10,000 years were now piles of broken glass, and the Trilaxians were dying from the constant noise. The few surviving Vaporase floated in their damaged containers, looking more like sick fog than the proud gas beings they had once been. Their representative spoke through a voice synthesizer that crackled with static because their natural communication methods no longer worked. The chemical attacks had poisoned 60% of their gas cloud homes, and the remaining Vaporase were slowly suffocating on their own toxic atmosphere. Even more shocking was the Herbani delegate who had once been a beautiful plant creature covered in colorful flowers. Now he looked like a dying tree with brown, withered leaves falling from his branches. The psychological attacks had broken the minds of most Herbani, and those who survived were too damaged to feel anything except fear and sadness. One by one, the alien delegates came forward to beg for mercy. Each species offered everything they had to make the human attacks stop. The Trilaxians offered their crystal technology that could cut through any material. The Vaporase promised to share their gas manipulation abilities that could terraform dead planets. The Deeplings said they would give humans access to all their underwater cities and ocean worlds. But the most desperate offers came from species that had not even been directly attacked yet. They had heard what happened to the others, and they were terrified that humans would come for them next. The Skyborn offered to give humans their flying cities. The hive minds promised to share their collective intelligence. The energy beings said they would power human worlds for free, forever. So Young listened to each desperate plea with no expression on her face. She had studied these same aliens for years, learning their languages and customs while they thought she was just another harmless human diplomat. Now she understood exactly how pathetic they really were. These creatures who had voted to enslave humanity were now crawling on the ground begging for their lives. General Dong Hyun stood beside the ambassador, wearing the uniform of the new Galactic Defense Force. The aliens did not know it yet, but humans had already taken control of most of their military assets. Human agents who had been embedded in alien governments for decades were now revealing themselves as the new rulers of countless worlds. The general held up a data pad that contained reports from across the galaxy. 17 major alien civilizations had been completely destroyed or crippled. 43 smaller species had surrendered without fighting. 112 worlds had been conquered by human forces that appeared out of nowhere. The numbers were staggering, and they proved that humanity had been planning this takeover for much longer than anyone had imagined. But the most shocking revelation came when Lieutenant Colonel Hai Jin stepped forward to address the terrified aliens. She had been working as a simple trade negotiator for 15 years visiting alien worlds and making business deals. Nobody had suspected that she was actually a military intelligence officer who was mapping every alien defense system and identifying key targets. Haye Jin explained that every human who had ever worked with alien governments had been a spy. Every diplomat, every trader, every scientist, every teacher had been gathering information and preparing for this day. The aliens had thought they were monitoring humanity, but humans had been studying them far more carefully. The aliens learned that their greatest mistake had been underestimating human patience and planning ability. While other species made decisions quickly based on immediate benefits, humans could plan for decades or even centuries. The vote to enslave humanity had not caught humans by surprise. It had been exactly what they were hoping would happen. So Young finally spoke, and her voice was calm and steady as she explained the new reality to the surviving aliens. The galaxy was now under human control and there would be no negotiations or compromises. The species that had voted to enslave humanity would now experience exactly what they had planned to do to Earth. But the humans were not going to be cruel masters like the aliens had planned to be. Instead, they would be efficient administrators who understood that ruling through fear was less effective than ruling through competence. The aliens would discover that human management was actually better than their own chaotic democratic system. The new galactic government would be based on merit rather than votes. Humans had proven their superiority through victory in battle, and that gave them the right to rule. The aliens who cooperated would be allowed to keep their homes and continue their lives. The species that resisted would be eliminated completely. Some of the alien delegates tried to argue that they had not really wanted to vote for human enslavement. They claimed they had been pressured by other species or that they had misunderstood the vote. But So Young had recordings of every speech they had made in favor of enslaving humanity. Their own words condemned them. The session ended when So Young announced that Admiral Quan Ho would be released from prison and appointed as the new Supreme Galactic Commander. The alien delegates who had cheered when he was led away in chains now trembled at the thought of facing him again. They knew that he would remember every species that had voted against humanity. As the aliens filed out of the broken chamber, they understood that their old galaxy was gone forever. They had voted to enslave the most dangerous species in the universe, and now they were paying the price. The hunters had become the hunted, and there was no escape from the trap they had walked into. The age of human dominance had begun, and it would last forever. 3 months had passed since the galaxy voted to enslave humanity, and Captain Taemin was waiting in his hidden command center deep inside an asteroid belt. The room was dark except for the glow of computer screens that showed maps of the entire galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of alien homeworlds, while green dots showed where human agents were positioned. The green dots were everywhere, and there were far more of them than anyone could have imagined. The message Captain Taemin had been waiting for finally came through on a secret frequency that no alien scanner could detect. The words were simple, but they made his heart race with excitement. The harvest begins now. Those 4 words meant that 50 years of careful planning was about to pay off across the galaxy. Thousands of human operatives received the same message at the exact same time. On 17 different worlds, humans who had been living normal lives suddenly became something else entirely. Dr. Ye Jin had been working as a simple researcher on the crystal world of Trilax for 15 years. The aliens thought she was studying their beautiful crystal formations, but she had actually been learning how to make those crystals vibrate at frequencies that would drive Trilaxians insane. She activated hidden devices that had been built into the crystal cities over many years. The Trilaxian capital city began to sing with a sound that made every crystal being fall to their knees in agony. The frequency was perfectly matched to their crystal biology, and it turned their greatest strength into their worst weakness. The beautiful crystal spires that had stood for thousands of years started to crack and shatter. The Trilaxians tried to escape, but the E sound followed them everywhere because their entire world was made of crystal. On the gas world of Vaporos, engineer Minjai had spent 12 years pretending to study atmospheric conditions. The Vapores had welcomed him because they thought humans could help them understand solid matter better. They never suspected that he was actually learning how to poison their gas clouds with compounds that were harmless to every other species, but deadly to gas beings. Minjay released the chemical agents into the atmosphere and watched as the vapores began to choke on their own air. The gas beings tried to flee to other parts of their world, but the poison spread faster than they could move. Their ghostly forms began to flicker and fade as their gas bodies became too toxic to maintain. They had voted to enslave humanity, and now they were paying the price. The peaceful Herbani found themselves facing psychologist Sora, who had been studying their empathic abilities for 8 years. She had learned that their greatest gift was also their greatest weakness. The Herbani could feel the emotions of every living thing around them, which made them kind and gentle. But Sora had discovered how to use this against them. She broadcast emotional frequencies that overwhelmed the Herbani with feelings of terror and despair. The plant beings could not shut out the artificial emotions, and they began to wither and die from the psychological assault. Their beautiful garden worlds turned brown, and dead as the Herbani lost the will to live. The species that had never hurt anyone was being destroyed by their own capacity for feeling. Major Park coordinated the attacks from his secret base hidden inside a moon that everyone thought was empty. His screens showed the results of decades of preparation. Humans had not just been living among the aliens for 50 years. They had been studying them, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for this exact moment. Every diplomatic meeting had been a chance to gather intelligence. Every trade agreement had been an opportunity to place human agents in key positions. The aquatic deeplings discovered that biologist Haiwan had been slowly changing the chemistry of their ocean worlds for 20 years. What they thought was environmental research had actually been preparation for a mass poisoning. The water that sustained all life on their planets was turning into acid that dissolved their fish-like bodies. The deeplings tried to find clean water, but every ocean on every world had been contaminated. The hive-minded collective faced computer specialist Dong Su, who had been working on their communication networks for a decade. They thought he was helping them improve their mental connections, but he had actually been planting viruses in their shared consciousness. The virus spread through their hive mind like wildfire, turning their greatest strength into chaos, as millions of beings received conflicting thoughts and commands at the same time. On the flying cities of the skyborne pilot Jin Wu had spent years learning their aerial technology, while secretly installing devices that could disrupt their anti-gravity systems. The floating cities began to fall from the sky as their technology failed. The skyborne, who had never touched the ground in their entire history, found themselves crashing into the surfaces of planets, with no way to get back into the sky. The ancient elders who had lived for 10,000 years discovered that historian Seo Jin had been studying their memory storage systems. The elders kept all their knowledge in crystal matrices that held the wisdom of millennia. But Seo Jin had learned how to corrupt these memories, turning the elders into confused beings who could not remember their own names. What terrified the aliens most was not just that humans were attacking them, but how precisely each attack was designed. Every species faced destruction that was perfectly matched to their biology and culture. The crystal beings were destroyed by sound. The gas beings were poisoned by chemicals. The empaths were overwhelmed by emotions. The aquatic species were killed by water. The hive minds were confused by viruses. The aliens had thought humans were simple, violent creatures who solved problems by fighting. But they were learning that human violence was not random or mindless. It was carefully planned and perfectly executed. Humans had studied every alien species for decades, learning their languages, their customs, their fears, and their weaknesses. Commander Su Jin watched from her battleship as reports came in from across the galaxy. The first phase of the human counterattack was complete in less than 6 hours. 17 major alien civilizations had been crippled or destroyed. The species that had voted to enslave humanity were now begging for mercy, but the messages they sent received no reply. The galaxy was beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. They had seen human aggression and assumed it meant humans were primitive, but aggression combined with intelligence was the most dangerous combination in the universe. Humans were not just fighters, they were strategic thinkers who could plan for decades. and execute their plans with perfect timing. Admiral Quan Ho smiled in his prison cell as he received secret reports about the success of the operation. The aliens had given humanity exactly what they needed by voting for enslavement they had provided, the moral justification for what was about to happen next. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, and now humanity was going to show them what war really meant. The trap had been sprung and there was no way out. 5 years had passed since the vote that was meant to enslave humanity, and Admiral Quan Ho stood once again in the Galactic Council chamber, but this time, he wore the golden uniform of the Supreme Galactic Commander. The room had been rebuilt and redesigned according to human preferences with clean lines and efficient lighting that made everything visible. The alien decorations that had once covered the walls were gone, replaced by simple displays showing the current status of every world in the galaxy. The chamber was much quieter now because less than half of the original alien species still existed as functioning civilizations. The rest had either been completely conquered or had voluntarily given up their independence after seeing what happened to those who resisted human efficiency, had replaced alien chaos, and the galaxy was running more smoothly than it ever had before. Admiral Quan Ho looked out at the few remaining alien delegates who sat in neat rows waiting. For his annual address, these creatures who had once voted unanimously to enslave his species now hung on his every word, hoping for permission to continue existing. Their various alien forms were still strange to look at, but they no longer seemed threatening or impressive. They looked like what they had always been beneath their arrogant exterior, which was weak and frightened animals. Dr. Yejin had built research stations on every major world in the galaxy, and her teams were advancing technology at a speed that made alien civilizations completely dependent on human innovation. The crystal beings who had survived the sonic attacks now relied on human-designed sound dampeners to live normally. The gas creatures used human-made filters to clean their poisoned atmospheres. The same species that had mocked human science 50 years ago were now begging for access to human discoveries, medical treatments that could cure diseases no alien doctor understood, energy systems that were 10 times more efficient than anything aliens had ever built, transportation networks that could move people and goods across the galaxy in days instead of months. Captain Taman controlled the trade routes that connected every inhabited world in the galaxy. His cargo ships carried the resources that kept alien civilizations alive, and his approval was needed for any major economic activity. The aliens had learned that arguing with human trade decisions was pointless, because humans understood economics better than species who had been trading for thousands of years. What surprised many aliens was that their lives had actually improved under human rule. Major Park had established security forces that kept the peace more effectively than the old Galactic Council ever had. Crime rates had dropped to almost zero because human law enforcement was swift and fair. Pirates who had once terrorized shipping lanes were now either dead or working as reformed security guards. The efficiency of human administration amazed even the aliens who hated being conquered. Commander Jin-A had implemented government systems that actually worked, instead of the endless debates and political games that had paralyzed the old council decisions. That used to take years of argument were now made in days. Problems that had seemed impossible to solve were fixed with simple, practical solutions. Many alien species discovered that they were more prosperous under human management than they had ever been under their own leaders. The Herbani who had survived the psychological attacks found that human agricultural experts could help them grow food more efficiently than their traditional methods. The Deeplings learned that human underwater technology was superior to their own ancient systems. But the most remarkable change was that some aliens actually preferred human rule to their old governments. The young aliens who grew up under human administration could not understand why their parents had ever wanted independence. Human schools taught alien children more effectively than their own educational systems. Human doctors kept alien families healthier than their traditional healers. The few remaining council members listened quietly as Admiral Quan Ho delivered his speech about the continuing expansion of human influence into unexplored regions of the galaxy. Human survey teams were discovering new worlds every month, and human colonists were already establishing settlements in distant star systems that no alien had ever reached. He reminded the alien delegates of their unanimous vote 5 years earlier, when they had been so certain that humanity needed to be controlled and contained. He spoke about the lessons they had learned about underestimating any species, especially one as adaptable and determined as humanity. He explained that their mistake had not been in recognizing human aggression, but in failing to understand that human violence was guided by intelligence. The Admiral outlined the new expansion plans that would take human influence beyond the known galaxy, into regions where strange new alien species might be waiting. Human exploration fleets were already building jump gates that would allow instant travel to distant galaxies where humanity could spread its superior civilization to countless new worlds. Some of the alien delegates shifted nervously when they heard about human expansion plans. They understood that any new species humans encountered would face the same choice that had been given to them: submit to human authority or be destroyed. The galaxy had learned that resistance to humanity was not just futile but suicidal. Admiral Quan Ho concluded his speech by announcing that the next phase of human expansion would begin immediately. Construction fleets were already building the massive ships that would carry human colonies to other galaxies. The alien species that cooperated with this expansion would be allowed to send some of their own people as junior partners in the colonization efforts. As the session ended, the alien delegates filed out quietly to return to their worlds, which were now human protectorates. Each of them understood that they lived only because humans allowed them to exist. Their species continued only because they served some purpose in the human empire. Their children would grow up as subjects of humanity and would probably be grateful for the privilege. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in the universe, which was to never underestimate the species that had climbed to the top of their food chain by being smarter than every other predator on their planet. Humans had not conquered the galaxy through superior weapons or technology, but through superior thinking and planning. The vote to enslave Earth had not been a political mistake or a military blunder. It had been a fundamental failure to understand what humanity represented. The aliens had seen aggression and assumed primitive behavior. But human aggression was guided by intelligence that could plan for centuries and execute those plans with perfect precision. Admiral Quan Ho walked slowly back to his office in the tower that had once belonged to the Grand Council leader. The massive brain creature with 1,000 eyes had thought it was the smartest being in the galaxy, but it had been outsmarted by a human who had spent 50 years pretending to be weaker than he really was. The new galactic order was built on a simple principle that every species in the universe would eventually learn. Humans were not just another alien race to be negotiated with or controlled. They were the future rulers of everything that existed. And resistance to that future was not just hopeless but impossible. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, and it would belong to humanity forever.